Welcome to Discover Portsmouth. I'm Kathleen Soldati. I'm the new Executive Director of Portsmouth Historical Society that runs the John Paul Jones House and the place you're sitting in, Discover Portsmouth. So this is exciting, our third Tea Talk, and thank you so much for coming out. We've had such great crowds. I just feel that the programming that Jerry Ann and Valerie are doing is just so magnetic, and I, again, appreciate you being here. I did want to mention that because of a grant, a very generous grant from TD Bank, we are able to provide free admissions to all of our Tea Talks, but you'll notice a cash donation container right there just as you go out. All of those donations go directly to Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail. So would you give a please welcome to our host for the day, Nate Cutting.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us here. Today we've got a very special presentation. It's going to be presented by Dr. Stephanie Freeman. She has earned her doctorate at Alabama A&M University. She is a passionate scientist who cares about the community. She's here to give her presentation about sustainability and economic viability. She's a personal friend of mine, and I'm very excited to hear her speak. So without further ado, Ms. Stephanie Freeman. Thank you.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
That's good. Some housekeeping notes. Would you please so kindly turn off your cell phones or put it on vibrating so you will not affect your neighbor to the left or the neighbor to the right. I'm going to use this time right now. I have a survey that I would like for you to fill out, and if you could please put on it A, and Charlie and Bonnie and Valerie will be circulating that. So I'm going to give you a few minutes, and hopefully you brought a pen or a pencil. I think we're almost done. I take it. So let's begin. Again, my name is Dr. Stephanie Freeman. I usually get called Stephanie more than anything. My presentation is on Black Heritage Tourism and Community. Please click the next slide for me. Thank you. This is the outline of the presentation that I'm presenting to you today. One is the overview of the New Hampshire tourism, and then looking at the definitions of cultural tourism, heritage tourism, and sustainable tourism. In the next section, we'll look at Portsmouth Black Heritage Tourism. Section 2, we will look at community, social and environmental impact, economics, community and partnerships, infrastructure, development, funding opportunities, discussion, and acknowledgments. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, you want me louder?
Yes.
You want me louder.
That's even better.
You want the cheerleader outside voice. Okay. Next slide, please. I'm going to make this enjoyable because I get tired of going to presentations. Either I'm going to fall asleep or I'm dreaming about what's next in my life. So I want it to be this more engaging. So if you have questions, we're going to hold them at the end. But if you're feeling like you're bored, I can move on to the next slide because I respect your time. I hope you respect mine. So we're all on the same page, right? Awesome. So the next, you've gone too far.
I have. Should I go back?
Yes, you've gone real far.
Why did that happen?
Your finger was
I'm fired.
You're good. Oh, I see what happened. That should
Is it
not
on
be
the
doing-
timer?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't do it.
You're exonerated.
All right, what's your sister's one?
It's a rowdy crowd. Just do it this way?
Yeah, hold on.
I like
Perfect. So we're just going to have a timer in the back. So we're going to go into New Hampshire tourism statistics. Next slide, please. Yes.
Can you tell us about those designs along the bottom edge?
Oh, you know what? I really like the design specifically because of flowers, and I thought about quilts because they always tell a story for Black history, and squares. And I think about when I was in upstate New York, and I met like the great-great-grandmother or great niece of Harriet Tubman, and she was telling about the Underground Railroad and how it was significant, and how quilts told a story how to get north. So I thought about this, and music was an integral part that kept either gospel or different types of music, kept people who were enslaved encouraged. And those are ways that we were telling stories about the challenges that they had in their past. So that's why I picked those. You're welcome.
Good to know.
So let's get back to the presentation. You're good. That's a good question. So these are 2011 statistics. 36 million travelers visited New Hampshire, and approximately $4.95 billion were spent. Did you know that New Hampshire for tourism is the second largest industry, employing over 74,000 people, generating $117 million in rooms and meals through tax revenue? Now, this is 2011 statistics. I was looking for more, but this is all that was available. But it gives you an idea. For over the past 5 years, it's probably quadrupled. That's just an idea there. So let's click on to the next slide, heritage tourism. So heritage tourism promotes the preservation of communities, historic resources, educates tourists and local residents in American history with the potential of economic gains. Tourism that respects natural and built environments, the heritage of people and place. So heritage tourism encompasses historic sites, and we can see that in Portsmouth, right? When you walk around, there's a lot of historic architecture sites, as well as landmarks and corridors, and places and events that we, if you've taken the Black Heritage Tourism Trail, you would hear about these places and events. Next slide, please. Cultural, too fast. There you go. All right, cultural tourism is defined by tourism industry professionals as travel directed toward, experience the arts, heritage, and special character of a place. Culture is a main attraction of tourism. Without culture, to make a difference, a tourist site would be a boring place. So that includes visual arts, humanities, performing arts, ethnic festivals, culture, and people. Next slide, please. So we're going to discuss sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism involves developing and maintaining community areas and environment in such a manner that is scalable and it remains viable for an indefinite time in a community. So here's some quotes that are linking tourism and heritage and culture in a way that's sustainable. Every time you enjoy a historic place, you are not only helping to preserve it, you are helping to improve the quality of life for residents and visitors alike. Save your heritage and your culture, share it with visitors, and reap the economic benefits of tourism. These quotes illustrate the core idea of sustainable tourist product and how it can contribute to the preservation of the natural environment and the local culture, as well as the development of local communities. Next slide, please. So I'm going to briefly graze over the benefits of tourism. So it increases resources for the protection and conservation of natural and cultural heritage resources, increased income from tourism expenditures, induced income from tourism expenditures, new employment opportunities, and increased tax base. Those are just a few. Next slide, please. So section 2, we're going to talk about community, social and environmental impacts, economics, community of partnerships, infrastructure development, funding opportunities. Next one, please. So we're going to get into a conceptual model that I created for community. So we're going to look at this in a way of European tradition, which is at the top. It's the dominant culture that basically fragmented different cultures and ethnicities. So on one side you have Indian tradition. When I say Indian, indigenous Americans from here. When Christopher Columbus arrived in America, he was like, oh, I thought I was in India. So that's how they got their names. And then African traditions. So we have African tradition that was imported here, and remind you that Africans had skill sets and abilities to build this country that we call America as a superpower. And we cannot forget, there was a time when, before Africans came, there were indentured slaves that were Caucasian or white, that were able to buy their freedom. That was the difference between chattel slavery and those who were indentured slaves who could buy their freedom over a period of time. So let's move on. In the center of this, before I forget, I'm sorry, let's move back. In the center of this is your Afro-Indian Ural culture, American culture. In some Latin countries it would be mestizos. But here we are talking about, our culture is so significant because I forgot to mention, when Africans did come here, they were fragmented from their family. And then they had to create their own culture. And then they were sold off somewhere else, and they had to redefine themselves again. I mean, that takes a lot of strength and just passion to move forward, regardless with all the challenges of working, post-traumatic stress from leaving your country to doing massive labor. Next slide, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in my master's thesis at North Carolina State University, I was looking at a case study of Black heritage tourism for farmers. Farmers who are descendants of African slavery, but land rich, but unable to have viable funding and resources. So during this time, I surveyed 3 user groups. We had horse riders, the black horse riders, we had some correction officers, and we also had this big bike week, motorcyclists in Virginia. And basically I did a survey inquiring how they felt about tourism, what they desired. So for those who just arrived, can you raise your hand? And one of our special people, John, Charlie, and Bonnie will pass you around a survey. And would you put down B when you get it? Thank you. So the whole goal of it was to understand what creates Black heritage tourism. So I'm going to go through some of this right now. So we have policies that are directly helping the development of Black heritage to ensure retention of Black land, the nature, and the environment. So these are definitions I coined because of talking to the farmers, and this family farm, there was 10 of them, 5 boys. I'm sorry, they're not boys, they're older than me. They were 5 men, 5 women. And they were all in their late 70s and 80s. And they were trying to figure out how can they pass this land when you have grandchildren and children who don't want to farm the land, have no interest in it. What do you do next? So I was thinking about, okay, heritage and identity. What a powerful statement that you have this much land, 500 acres of land. You're doing farming, you're doing traditional farming, you have cows and pigs and different things like that. And then you're adding this enhancement of tourism and recreation and fishing, which isn't very common. So this was one way of looking at it. So when I considered Black heritage tourism, I defined it as Blacks' contributions to the United States. It captures the spiritual, religious, medicinal, and recreation behaviors of the visitors. It can be in an urban or rural setting. It can evoke individual and collective memories of the past. So this is what the model I perceived was significant, because they all play a role. So if we start with history, when I think about the Black farmers, and we can think of the people who were enslaved here, they had no rights. They were chattel slavery. They fought for everything, emancipated. still looking for their family. And then we look at the laws and policies. So when I look at the black farmers and the ones I talked to, they were discriminated because they couldn't get their the grants. They could get in the door, and they walked away and it was thrown in the trash. So discrimination that consistently came through the masses because of the color of skin. Sometimes we can still encounter that today. So laws and policy preventing that. And then we have community. So if you have a community that is challenged or defined by the history, law, and policy, it then starts affecting your collective memory and authenticity of your experience. And then education. When I was talking to these farmers, they couldn't really get education. It wasn't a priority because they had to farm the land, manage it, and that was their priority. And when I think about segregation, when books were passed down from the white community to black communities, they were like 5, 10 years old. So you have an education disparity, and then economic independence. If you're a sharecropper, you could be in debt because, one, you didn't have the education to calculate, what do I need to get out of the debt? How can I move away from this circumstance to be an independent person? And then we look at nature and the environment. I can tell you this, my background being in forestry and agriculture, my family was like, why are you in this field? I don't understand. You got a doctorate in doing stuff that we consider gardening as a hobby, but not as a serious job. So my undergrad is in horticulture. So dealing with that cultural issue too can be a challenge amongst your own because of the collective memory and legacy. That played an important role. But over time, they appreciate what I did because they were like, okay, yeah, we have to get over our own fears and of the past and see that there are opportunities that we don't think about being in this field. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I've kind of defined some of these. I'll just let you read them because I kind of talked about them already.
Too small to read.
Oh my gosh. All right, well then I did the clarification on the previous slide, so we're going to move on to the next slide. I'm sorry. I didn't know people were going to be visually challenged. I'm sorry. I usually wear glasses too, so I understand. So let's talk about Portsmouth Black Heritage Tourism. So I'm going to pick up on some key things I thought were interesting when I was reading it and had the opportunity in May to participate in the burial ground events. 1645, first African in New Hampshire sold to Mr. Williams. 1708, the New Hampshire census records 70 slaves. 1714, law makes slaves taxable. So that goes back to the chattel slavery. You're looked at and viewed as property and not as a human being. 1760, Portsmouth town records refer to a site as a Negro burying yard. 1779, 20 enslaved Portsmouth African petitioned the New Hampshire state government for freedom. That's very powerful. And I'll get back to that in a second. In 2003, 13 graves discovered under Chestnut Street. So you have slaves who are writing these petitions, and they weren't supposed to, so slaves weren't supposed to write and read and be educated enough to push legislation as a slave. That's empowering when the construct of Black Heritage Tourism, that lifts people up who may not know their history of the importance of reading, education, and pushing, even if you don't understand, just believing that you need to be free. Next slide, please. So let's look at the benefits of Black Heritage Tourism. So we have pride, leading to better economic viability and development in the community, improved infrastructure from the revenues, development of local handicrafts, increased community viability leading to economic development opportunities. I just repeated that myself, but just to emphasize, this is important. And then research that's been done, Black Portsmouth, 3 Centuries of African American Heritage, by Mark James Salmons and Valerie Cunningham, who's in the audience. It's a well-documented book explaining this history. So let's give her a round of applause. And I have have an article that was written on heritage tourism as a mechanism to facilitate the preservation of Black family farms. Next slide, please. So let's look at the social and environmental impact. Creating cultural image can affect the quality of life of the local residents. Incorporating resident perceptions, ensuring the community and the environment is clean, multiple uses for heritage tourism. So let's look at this picture. These are areas where in 2003 graves were identified. And you could see the passion and desire for this community to take advantage of basically coming together collectively to create a memorial site. That speaks volumes of how much passion that was here to make it from 2003 to 2015, raising the monies, working together because they had passion and vision. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is a glacier analogy. This is an economic impact. So we think of the iceberg. So most of the time when you think of glaciers, oh, it's just a small little piece. But when you look further down, it has roots, almost like a tree. You just see enough of it. But here's the point. Spending by visitors, direct spending by visitors, only the tip of the iceberg. That gets back to what I'm saying. It's easy to measure how many people visit, how much money has been the expenditures, and people have visited. But the indirect impact of this is much larger because you have to figure out how is this funding revenue benefiting the Black Heritage Tourism Trail? How is it indirectly and directly benefiting the community? So these are things that are sometimes hard to measure when you look at economic impacts. Next slide, please. Community and partnerships. So community, as I define here, to ensure sustainability of heritage tourism emphasis should be placed on the importance of partnership, competitiveness, public participation, skills development and benefits by local communities as crucial elements for careful development, preservation, and management of heritage tourism. And then partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, are key in the heritage tourism project. It might involve the organization that owns or cares for the heritage site, local government, regional communities, museums, and other organizations that can strengthen the awareness of Black heritage tourism. Next slide, please. So, our community benefits. So if we look at it in a New Hampshire way, ownership of tourism business by residents, collective ownership and or management of a tourism business, joint venture between communities, consultation by participation in tourism planning bodies, public participation and community involvement in the implementation of tourism strategy and funding opportunities. These are all important in the benefits of community. All right, next slide, please. Infrastructure development. This gets into how do we increase visitors to visit to the site and the community, how to increase their length of stay, how to increase their spending per day, and then how to ensure that they will come back, or even word of mouth saying, hey, let's come back again, and make it an annual thing. Next slide, please. Funding opportunities. This is imperative in tourism and any business. Is about how do you sustain the process of doing this. So let's look at cultural heritage grants, because this is pretty much what Black Portsmouth Heritage Tourism is. It's a cultural piece, and it's a heritage site, and then sustainability, which I talked earlier. So some of the grants that I found were like American Express Philanthropic Grants Program. And the purpose of that is to engage communities to become involved in sustaining heritage tourism and cultural sites, which is something that Portsmouth could consider. Carnegie Corporation of New York, it was created in 1911 to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding. Grants must benefit the people of the United States. So there are grants that are here to support and sustain. And I had the opportunity in 2007 to participate in the Getty Leadership Institute program out in California. It was a great opportunity to see how museums are sustaining their communities and using avenues to create awareness. And some of that is going back to what you asked me, Harvey, about virtual tourism, which I'm interested because there are certain museums that are taking advantage of technology to educate children pre through K. And I want to mention, if you haven't heard, that the Black Heritage Tourism, they have a curriculum for children. And if you can advocate this or have a teacher that can do that. So those are one way that we could use that virtually to educate the masses about the history, American history, and Portsmouth history. Let's go to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about discussion. So the survey that, please click the next slide. The survey I handed out was basically to get you to think about it, and since I'm going to use this information and summarize it, I didn't want any bias. So as a scientist, if you have bias, that's bad news. So I would like to open this up. Actually, let me do it this way. I've concluded my presentation, but I'd like to use this section as my discussion section to further create a dialogue and what's next. Yes?
We go back to the slides where the slaves petitioned to be free in New Hampshire. You might be able to point out that that was just signed like a year ago.
That's right. So yeah, it was just signed a year ago that the slaves who petitioned. Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome. I'm sorry.
Yes, Harvey?
I'm wondering if United Way is on the list of organizations that would fund this organization. I don't know.
Repeat that again? I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Okay, I'm wondering if United Way of America is on the list of targets to be seen to put money into this organization.
You know, that's a very good question. Valerie would know better than I would.
Is it possible to do that?
Probably not.
Why not? I'm not challenging you, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that they contribute a huge amount of money to organizations throughout this country.
Yeah, well, we're very familiar with United Way and in fact have collaborated with them in the Chamber of Commerce and so on, but our organization is not one that they would support.
Does that mean we don't qualify?
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Valerie, thanks so much for that information so far. There has been one request from the audience to say maybe Val can come up and talk a little bit more about that from just a different vantage point so more people could hear you to say what's been the history. But you can think about coming up to speak about some of that. We do have another question on the floor. My name is Nate, and I'm a volunteer here with the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail.
He's a Sankofa scholar with the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail.
And Jerry Ann couldn't make it here today, and so I'm going to try to step in to facilitate. Now, I can't do it probably half as well as Jerry Ann can, but I'm going to do everything I can to try to get to know some of the people who I don't. So I might ask your name, and then I'll repeat your question, and we can have a great discussion. That's actually one of my favorite things about these tea talks. So with no further ado, your name is?
I'll stand, I'm not shy. My name is Johanna Lyons, I'm from Portsmouth, I've grown up here my whole life, so love these tea talks. My question, Stephanie, is that Portsmouth is made up of lots of neighborhoods, lots of different immigration. How do you see the cultural tourism around the Black history integrating into the larger tourism of Portsmouth and New Hampshire? Because, you know, we have a lot of these really special immigrant groups that came in.
That's a very good question. I see several things. One, this is New England. We look at New England, it is the epicenter of America. And Black history, and we don't talk about Indian history, how they were here and doing their part, and a lot of them have been wiped out, or they've been mixed, interracially mixed, white and Indian, Black and Indian, all of that. And that's part of our history that we will have to probably extract. And then that becomes, the community has to be open to dealing with the past, trying to figure out what to do in the present to make sure that it's actually captured accurately and not biased, because we know whoever writes the history is usually the dominant culture. And nobody wants to be seen as inhumane in the situation. So that would be an open-minded community and committee members willing to say, okay, this is our history. We don't like it, but we're going to have to tell the truth about it and not sugarcoat it. And I think that's where that's a dialogue that needs to start occurring. And I'm not quite sure. Maybe Valerie has more insight on that.
Yeah, I might say maybe we can push it out to you guys to say, did you want to comment on how you see the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail and different groups collaborating to share a more unified vision of that history? Yeah, go ahead.
I would very much like Valerie or Nate you to follow up on that point. I'm interested in how you got the community behind you. I'm not from Portsmouth. I'm from Gloucester, Massachusetts, and I'm very much interested in developing our own trail. If you could tell me some anecdotes, perhaps of some pushback, and then how you dealt with issues that arose when you first proposed your trail, I would like to know about that, and perhaps how you got the larger community behind you and which partnerships you were able to develop successfully. And then I have other questions about some of your tourism statistics and the benefits of a virtual trail versus a straight on the ground site. I'll try to give you a quick response to that. There was a group of people.
I know you don't like the mic. Today is one of those days.
A group of people from the community had been meeting, called together by a couple leaders of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation in around 1990. And the concern that those few people had at that time was what we're talking about, the diversity of the greater Portsmouth community. The fact that Pease Air Force Base was leaving, and that was going to make a big difference in the demographic composition of our neighborhoods. So they called together leaders of different organizations around the area, all kinds of different organizations. And I think we ended up with a group of about 20, maybe 30, probably closer to 30 people representing religious organizations. It was the most diverse group of people probably I've ever been involved with. And this was classism, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, gender, physical ability, you name it. We had it in our group. And we did several projects together over a couple of years, got to know each other's organizations very well, formed close friendships, and meanwhile, somebody, me, was doing some research on the Black community. And it occurred to me that everybody in this group was familiar with the streets of Portsmouth, but I bet they didn't know what I had found out about these particular sites around town. So at one meeting, I put myself on the agenda and I told them, this is what happened over here, 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 and here. Everybody said, wow, we should get this in the schools. So a volunteer, Mark Salmons, volunteered to help me write a little brochure to go into the schools. The 300+ page resource book was self-published and put into all of the public schools at the expense of the charitable foundation. And then people wanted copies. And then University Press said, let's make a real book out of this. And that became Black Portsmouth. Meanwhile, the organization that was producing this was a subcommittee of the larger committee. And somebody said, why don't we put some markers around town? But then we need to raise money. If we have to raise money, we have to form a 501c3. So we had one of the people on the committee was a lawyer. He said, my office will help you with that. And then we were off and running. So by 1995, we had created the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail. So that's how it started, with the idea of just letting people know that there was Black history here. But then we had to do teacher workshops, and then we did these kind of workshops, and that's, guess what? That became us. So it was an evolving thing. All we were trying to do at the beginning was just to say, there's Black history here. And there's Black history all through New Hampshire and northern New England and the United States of America. And that woman there, Mabel Barnett, helped Jerry Ann Bogus establish the Milford Black Heritage Trail to tell the story about Harriet Wilson and so forth. We have curriculum for the schools of Portsmouth. We have allies in Exeter, Canaan, New Hampshire, Canterbury, all over the place. So it's an idea whose time has come.
And so are you linking physically on your online site to these other trails?
We haven't, no, we're still the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail, but Jerry Ann and I, well, that's part of our outreach program, because, you know, we're not going to say, oh, we can't do that because you live in Newington. So it just, we encourage other communities to create their own programs. Yeah.
Jerry Ann is super approachable if you ever wanted to talk to her. Her name is Jerry Ann Bogus, G-E-R-R-A-I-A-N-N-E, Bogus. But we also have a sister organization. Kel, did you want to speak for a second?
I just wanted to comment on what Valerie was saying and to ask, and I think you did, that if you did docent training for the historical houses in the area who were reluctant to talk about the fact that they had slaves in the household.
Yeah, I'd like to hear.
Yes, yeah, that, of course.
It's really a Valerie show.
She's trying. Yeah, so the docents in the historic houses, of course, had not been telling their own stories because they didn't know how. They were embarrassed or for whatever reason. So one of the things that we did at the beginning, and Kel Edwards knows this because he's one of the founding members and then he actually helped literally, and Jennifer Stiefel, the two of them helped to write every single one of those markers that you see around town. So we were invited, or we invited ourselves, to go to the historic houses to talk with the docents about how to talk about sensitive topics. And, you know, what do you say when somebody asks you certain questions? And so there's a lot of educating that has to be done. But the community was willing at that, to do it. And we didn't, I think you had asked about pushback. If there was any, I'm not aware of it. Everybody that we heard from anyway was encouraging, and we had to raise money, which we did very quickly for those markers. And we raised a lot of money, for an organization that nobody had ever heard of.
I know sustaining this organization takes money, and any organization takes money. And I'm concerned about advertising and promoting this organization, particularly in New Hampshire and in New England. I think the community, the general community, is hungry for this information. They don't say they are until they get a little taste, and then they want more. But I think funding, sustainability, having money roll in here so you can promote and advertise this organization and what it does is huge, and I want to volunteer to help you.
Well, that's great. I should also say that we are a small organization. We don't require a lot of money to put on programs like this one today. We do require money to put on our larger programs, such as the Black New England Conference that we have every year in the fall, and our spring symposium, which we have every year. Those cost money, and we always need donors and grant money for that. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money for a group of people to come together and talk. So I don't ever want to hear people say, well, we can't do it because we don't have enough money. It doesn't take money to do everything, folks. It really doesn't. It takes hard work. It takes some enthusiasm and persistence. But I think when you find that people are interested in what you have to say, and if you touch the right people, you will get a response. But I also want to say, you can either spend your time raising money, or you can spend your time doing programs. We have chosen to spend our time doing programs. And so I suppose if we had you working with us to raise the money, then we could expand and do more programs.
All righty, that's a tough question to follow over Harvey, but the gentleman in the back.
Yes, I'm Alec. The family and I just moved to Portsmouth right before Christmas. I believe on our property we actually discovered that there was an ancient Native American burial ground that they found on the property history. My question is there an indigenous peoples organization that could somehow be integrated into this trail and organization?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to have
Awesome question, but we will concur it to Valerie. I told you about the show. She's just in denial.
I just wanted to say that we are partners. We have a partnership with the Indian Museum in Warner, New Hampshire. That is the extent of what I can say in response. I think it's and Jerry Ann has connections because she worked at UNH as long as I did for years, but in a different capacity. So she has connections with the Native American organizations on campus at UNH. That's where we are right now.
in the back. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, I guess, for Valerie and Stephanie. That many of you remember that last May when the ADG was dedicated, there was a wonderful article written by a journalist from the Richmond Dispatch in Virginia, which was then reprinted in the Portsmouth Herald, basically saying, you know, shame on Richmond, Virginia, because they also had discovered, obviously, a very large African-American burial site, and how come Portsmouth can do this and we still haven't? So I'm just wondering, since the ADG was dedicated last May and has been around now for about 9 months, lots of people coming to see it, writing about it, are you aware of, have there been increased work across the country on other burial sites prompted by ours?
Well, it's been ongoing. Not all communities have been as successful as ours in coming together to do something about it. But these burial sites are showing up all over the place. In fact, I just yesterday was reading about 2 more, one in New Jersey and one in New York State. So, I mean, there were enslaved Africans all over this land. They had to be buried someplace. So the fact that they've been overlooked all these years is one thing. But they are coming to life because people want to see them now, I think. And we Jerry Ann and I have talked to many communities, consulted with them because they want to know, want ideas on how they might proceed in their own communities. Everyone is different. The one, not that particular one, but there's another one in Virginia where connected with the school, the medical school, where cadavers were brought in after dark to the medical school at a time, when that's the only way medical students could learn what they were learning. So, and it was easy to get black cadavers. Well, after they were finished with these cadavers, they'd be thrown into this old well. The old well recently was opened up, and now they discovered that all these remains are in the well. And so the community is struggling to get the campus where this all happened and the local government to cooperate with them to try to figure out what they're going to do about it. That's a tough one. But there are others too where there just are no markers. The families say, my family's buried there, I know they're there, and then they have the documentation, but there's nothing on the ground to say this is where they are buried. So, and the highways came through, and
So what she's talking about is a very common phenomenon. When I was working on my PhD at Alabama A&M University, I participated, prior to that, I participated in the Selma to Montgomery Historic Trail and worked with the National Park Service as well as George Washington Carver Museum in Tuskegee and Booker T. Washington Museum. And it's very typical for those who are socially, economically deprived, not at a status, that this is where the environmental injustice comes in, where people are buried, there's no value, eminent domain is used to push people out of the land to make highways. So if you go to Montgomery, some of the elders would say, hey, this was my family farm. But because of eminent domain, it's now the highway, the superhighway through the state. But this is a common phenomena, and that's where the environmental justice issue comes in. Where I was doing my research on my dissertation, I was looking at water quality. I was jumping into river streams and caves and collecting samples of hexavalent chromium. If you watch the movie Erin Brockovich, she was fighting Hinckley in that area in Hinckley, California, where people were dying of cancer. So my challenge was, here is a group in Triana, predominantly black community, where Redstone Arsenal and NASA is located. Due to eminent domain, they pushed them further south. The Tennessee River flows right through it, and what happens, hexavalent chromium, let me just give you an idea. You're sitting on it because it's an anti-corrosiveness. It coats your cars, your laptops. So all the satellites that have gone up, every NASA shuttle that has gone up, it is literally that remnant of the liquid that has been flowing through the Tennessee River. So there were examples of people dying of cancer at a very early age, and they settled because they didn't know or they weren't aware. They settled for less. So they have still challenges, health issues, but because they settled, and that goes back to laws, policy, that conceptual model that I was talking about, and education, collective memory, and then making choices not only from my current view, but to look at the legacy. Sometimes that education piece is a serious contribution and decision in what will happen to the legacy of that community as well. Other questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Question about cross-marketing. My name's Jim. We just, actually, my most spoken son, we moved from Nashville. We don't have a very diverse in terms of the arts and stuff, so we moved to Portsmouth. But in terms of cross-marketing, and you talked about $36 billion in tourism, a lot of that comes to the seacoast, the mountains, the lakes, the seacoast. How do you cross-market a Black Heritage Trail within, especially Portsmouth? If anyone knows, this week is Portsmouth Beer Week. How can you cross-market, non-traditional cross-market, the Black Heritage Trail within those type of things? Is there a case study that's been done that shows that you can cross-market not only to the Strawberry Bank and to Discover Portsmouth, but non-traditional cross-market to generate not only education but propagate funding?
Well, that's a very good question. That's something, unless you have a suggestion, Valerie. That's a very good question. I would suggest there's some ways, and that would go back into the culture piece of how people were cooking and preparing food, and a potential of maybe identifying, it may not have been beer, it might have been light white liquor or something that they were producing, and having some correlation of like techniques that could have been potentially used in different agriculture resources for farming. But that would take some research. That's a good idea, though.
I think I can weigh in on that.
Yes, you may, Nate.
So here at the Discover Portsmouth Center, there is like this umbrella called, I want to say it's the Discover Portsmouth Center, right? And but there's like a Portsmouth Historical Society. That's the name of it.
That's it.
And so, I don't know if I just have the microphone. But the woman that came out before, Kathleen Soldati, she is the executive director. And so with our sponsor, TD Bank, I think that what they try to do is just share PR. We share a website. And so when people want to go for a walk to the John Paul Jones house, or we'll talk about the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail. And so we do some of that work, I guess, just through people work. But Kathleen could probably speak more to how we try to cross-pollinate different organizations outside of the umbrella of the Discover Portsmouth Center. So that's how I think that works. Did anybody have another question?
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the virtual reality tour.
Oh, thank you. That's my passion. Before I do that, I have to do a 30-second public service announcement by Valerie. She wants us to all be aware of that the public community access will be, they're currently, Portsmouth Public Health, see, we call it public health, bad news. Portsmouth Community Access Channel will be showing excerpts from these programs. So you'll have an opportunity to view these presentations. As for the question for virtual tourism, there's a lot of potential. If you've never, I had an opportunity to go to San Francisco. There's a MOAD. It's a virtual tour / museum where they talk about the history of African diaspora. So what I'm interested in, being new to the community for like about 2 years now, how to take this information, because there are people, for example, when I did talk to people at the, I forgot the full name, but MOAD, they were having people as far as Japan viewing this material on a daily basis, learning about history. So this virtual tourism is a different group of people who we have access to tell a more intimate story and learn more about it, and if there's ever an opportunity, they could come and visit. So you asked about cross-marketing, and I'm thinking with the virtual tour, and if someone wanted to come for a leaf peeper season, you know, go see the leaves, then there's the opportunity to be in an oasis of Portsmouth. Then you have this opportunity, because we have this virtual presence, that you could actually come and visit and take a very intimate tour. So that's what the melding of the virtual tour and the local tour. So you create a market. So there's potential for funding, PayPal, you know, other ways to sustain this project.
Is it in the foreseeable future?
Yes, it is. I have a draft of one. I shared it
Talking to an
before.
86-year-old lady, I'd like to see it.
Are you sure? Let's say it's a prototype. I can pull it up. Do you want that, Valerie? It's on her. So let me put this
Okay. and
everything
while
together.
You're doing that. Let me. Something else occurred to me too. I think I didn't quite understand your question, but I'm going to say this. Maybe it'll answer you. As local historians and people interested in local history become more informed and aware of what that history really is, they begin to understand how tightly interlocked the stories are. There isn't our story and their story. The whole thing is our story. You cannot talk about colonial Portsmouth without talking about the significance of the slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade. There would not have been all of this shipbuilding in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, if they had not been going across the Atlantic to the west coast of Africa, to the West Indies, to South America, to the southern colonies, to Newport, Rhode Island, and back home to Portsmouth, with African people on those ships, along with the other goods that they were taking that way, and the sugar and the cotton goods that they were bringing this way. New England would not have had textile mills and railroads without the cotton industry in the South. So, and whether people were slave owners or not, if they lived here, they were connected and dependent upon the slave-based economy. And this is what we have never learned in school, and this is part of our mission, is to give people the other perspective on and fill in some of those gaps in our American history. So that, I think, maybe.
If I could just respond, I agree absolutely with everything you have just said. The problem is that for some of the local organizations where I am, they are very much invested in the idea of the independent, self-reliant image of the New England fisherman and farmer that has nothing to do with this story. And so when you attempt to change the narrative, for some people, it's very uncomfortable. And there is, of course, as this history becomes better known, as you said, through local historians, there is now work being done on, as I'm sure, Valerie, I know you are aware of the Tracing Center and their new book, How to Interpret Slavery at Historic Sites, and other people talking about how to approach the subject.
We've had sessions here.
I'm sure you have, yeah. But I would love for them to come to Gloucester. We're working slowly to make this happen, and this has been a process for us with lots of public talks to get people aware and then enthusiastic. So we're moving behind you. I'm using you as a model.
All right. Sometimes elders push you out the nest before you want things out. So, for no further ado, this is a draft of and a prototype of what virtual tourism can look like for the Black Portsmouth Heritage Tourism. And Valerie didn't mention I'm a Sandco volunteer too. Yeah. All right. So here we go. Just have an open mind, and I'm always open to feedback and suggestions. because I may have one vision, but you may have something that may enhance it or tweak it. Because I always feel like everyone is like, we're a kaleidoscope. You turn it one way, you get one angle. You turn it another way, you get a different perspective. So the more people that are involved in this, and we can meet in the middle to encompass what we're talking about, cross-marketing, education, and awareness, then we have accomplished what we needed to do at this time. So can you hit play, please? Or do you want the microphone?
Yeah, I think you got it. It should play through the speakers and we should be okay. So.
Can you lower the mic stand by any chance? Or?
Your historical society has talked to our group, your Gloucester.
The Cape Ann Museum?
They have talked to our group about the Black history.
My name is Stephanie. I am your virtual tour guide. Our mission here at the trail is to preserve the history and culture of the African American community in Portsmouth and the New Hampshire region. Our work promotes awareness and appreciation of people of color through education and public programs. The accomplishments of our volunteer organization have also served as a model across the country, demonstrating that it is possible for a small number of dedicated individuals to celebrate and preserve the little-known stories of African Americans. To learn more about the Black Heritage Trail, click the link. Today's virtual tour sites will consist of the Whipple Home, Rosary's Beauty Shop, and the Navy Yard, viewed from Prescott Park. First stop is the Whipple Home on 43 Pearl Street. In the mid-1700s, two African boys were sent by their wealthy royal family from Amabu on the Gold Coast of West Africa to be educated abroad. A deceitful sea captain brought them into American slavery. They were enslaved by William Whipple, who raised them in his Portsmouth home, the Lafayette mansion. The older boy was named Prince. Kofi kept his African name in 1777. The New Hampshire legislator made William Whipple a brigade general and sent him to drive General Burgoyne out of Vermont. Prince was reluctant to assist in fighting for freedom he himself would never enjoy. The general promised Prince manumission in exchange for service, so Prince accompanied him through the Revolution. Though most states, including New Hampshire, had statutory prohibitions against black militiamen, Prince was among many black men who served. Prince was said to be with George Washington at his Christmas Eve crossing of the Delaware River in 1776. Whipple freed Prince 7 years later in February 1784. In 1781, Prince married Dinah Chase, a emancipated by Newcastle minister Reverend Chase. In 1786, Kofi married Rebecca Davison. Like many newly freed people, they chose to stay in the area that was familiar. General Whipple's widow loaned them a lot at the back corner of her garden. They moved a small house onto it and raised their families there. Prince worked as the chief steward at assemblies, balls, and weddings. Kofi played fiddle at many of these events. Dinah did cash work for North Church and conducted a school for black children sponsored by the Ladies Charitable African Society. In 1796, after enjoying freedom for only 12 years, Prince died, leaving Dinah and several children. Kofi died in.
So that gives you an idea of what a virtual tour can be like. There's always opportunity to improve it, but that's what a prototype is, to give you a perception and idea of what virtual tourism is. It's basically, hi, I'm Stephanie. Come join me on this ride. And if you want to learn more, click on this information. So it'd be linked to the Black Portsmouth Heritage Trail website, and that's where the marketing and fundraising to sustain it. And also we could all share this with the public access as well. So there's ways of marketing and communicating and getting people involved and aware of their history. Yes, ma'am.
As a videographer, I'm a big fan of the web, okay? And my hope is that you folks will get some of your programming out on the web with some snippets of what you've had already. It's just stunning information. And as people have said, it needs to be shared. And it's invaluable. So as far as helping get the word out, hopefully you'll see some of this on the web.
This is the work of the Sankofa scholars, Stephanie Freeman, Nate Cutting, Brad Randolph. Who else is here? Freddie Ross, Cindy Matheson, Charlie Clark. Who else? Jennifer Steeple is one of our original Sankofa scholars, and of course, Cal Edwards and Royalene.